Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Stock Market Today. You have Alyssa Quorum here, and I am joined by Ed Carson. We're going to take a look at the action for the major indexes, but first, Ed's going to give us a rundown of a couple of stocks that we have our eye on today. How's it going, Ed?
Going fine, Allie. We're going to take a look at Apple today, which pulled back a little bit on its 5G iPhone launch. ASML broke out ahead of earnings, and Teladoc Health was flirting with a buy point as well.
That's right. And here's a look at the NASDAQ, which closed down about 0.1% for the day after spending a little bit of the session in the green today, but digesting gains after a huge move yesterday. And then we also had the S&P 500 and Dow down about 5 to 0.6% each on the day. So it's looking like we had an inside relatively quiet day today, Ed.
Yeah, and really, when you think about it, I mean, that'd be fine without any other news. But when you think about some of the news, I mean, Apple, we'll talk about that, but some of the big cap stocks, they paused after enormous gains. You can't expect 5-6% gains on trillion-dollar stocks every day. And meanwhile, you had a coronavirus vaccine trial halted, and then a coronavirus antibody trial halted. So those were some negative news, and yet we moved right along.
Yeah. And speaking of Apple, let's go ahead and check in on that today. Reversing lower, as you mentioned, Ed, but still holding that 120 round number. Of course, we had the stock gaining, let's see, a really big gain yesterday, up about 6.4%. And you mentioned the announcement of the new product lineup, its first 5G phone, but not all too surprising for investors in terms of what they actually announced.
I think people have been expecting this since for a full year. They've been waiting for the 5G phone. I mean, and look, it should do well. And there's nothing about that. There's nothing negative really out of this. It's just that we knew it. I mean, if you go up over 6% one day and down less than 3% the next, when everything is basically in line with expectations, that's a pretty good move.
Yeah. I'd say so. So we have this kind of cup base shaping here. So hopefully we can see Apple continue to climb up a little higher on the right side of that pattern, maybe form a handle. We always like to see those handles form on the right side of our bases, but an early entry could have presented itself for investors with that rebound off of the 50-day line or 10-week with a pullback to that level. And we do have earnings towards the end of the month. So if investors did act on the strong move that they saw yesterday, potentially enough time to build a cushion heading into earnings?
Yeah, I mean, we'll just have to see. And that, you'll have time to decide. I mean, maybe you have enough cushion, maybe you don't. But there's definitely a few weeks before you have to make that decision.
All right. And speaking of earnings, ASML in the semiconductor equipment group breaking out ahead of its earnings report tomorrow with a gain of about 1.5% and above average turnover. This is one that we touched on IBD Live this morning. And even though it is breaking out into a buy zone, you don't want to be buying, Ed, right before an earnings report. But if we do get a positive reaction, I mean, analysts are expecting earnings up 62%, sales up 31%. Both of those would mark acceleration from the quarter before. So if we see a positive reaction, that could be a nice catalyst for the stock.
Yeah, and even if it gapped up, it would probably still work as an earnings gap since it was it's really just a percent above the buy point. We made a good call to highlight this one, and this was one of a few chip gear makers that broke out today. But yeah, it'd be really scary unless you were using an option to buy it. You just don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And so that's basically it. It looks really good though.
Yeah, you mentioned in our notes we have the KLA, ticker KLAC, and then KLIC breaking out today, both in the same group. So that's a good thing, and we will definitely be keeping tabs on this one tomorrow. And as you mentioned, we're talking about a lot of actionable stocks on IBD Live. So if you haven't tuned in yet, we definitely hope you are joining us on that show. Another name that we talked about on IBD Live is Teladoc which had a strong day today, up about 6.4%. It had a little bit of choppy action here, wasn't quite able to hold its 50-day line, but it's now looking pretty good, especially with a gain like you had today and flirting with a buy zone of its own.
Yeah, I mean, for one thing, if you could really were aggressive, you could just say last week's high was an
Yeah.
entry, but I think you could say there's a double bottom, sort of an ugly looking double bottom at 233.93, and so it did get above that intraday. It just didn't quite close above it, but a 6% move is pretty nice. I mean, keep in mind is that one reason why it fell down that second leg was because it was buying Livongo, I believe, or maybe I can't remember which one it was.
I
But
think it
buying,
might have been the
yeah,
first.
there's the first one. You're right.
Yeah.
That was really harsh. Buying Livongo, and so there's still some issues there. The fact that it's going up is doing fine. Livongo, which still ticker LVGO, that one is trading pretty much like Teladoc. I mean, ever since the deal. So it flirted with a buy point as well today. My feeling is buy the acquiring company if you want it, just because that's what it's really going to move with, unless the deal falls apart, and then who knows what either one of the stock does.
That's a good point, which is Teladoc,
Which is
right? Not
Teladoc.
Livongo.
Yeah, and so that's how they're
Yeah.
going. And it's obviously it's a hot field. I mean, Teladoc and Livongo both growing like crazy. There's a rival Amwell that broke out of an IPO base. I mean, look, I mean, there's all sorts of. It's a great story. Nobody wants to go to the doctor right now to get sick, and so it seems like it would be a great market that has a lot of potential.
Yeah. So that's why we have all of these stocks on our radar. September was a pretty rough month, but what it did allow for was for a lot of these top stocks to set up again. So we have been seeing breakouts lately, and now stocks even getting extended from buy areas. So the market is looking pretty good right now. What are your thoughts on just kind of the overall market action that we've seen so far this week?
Yeah, it's been really great. The major averages are going well. The big cap techs are going well. Leading stocks are doing well. There's a lot of buying opportunities. Even on a day where the markets really went down a little bit, there are still a lot of strong stocks doing great stuff, follow-on buys. I mean, it's a really good opportunity right now.
Yeah, it is. And we're going to be looking at all of these opportunities, but also remaining flexible. Every day is a new day, and we will go over your updated battle plan in detail every morning on IBD Live. That's our daily morning live stream. Our experts are sharing our screens. We're sharing stock ideas, a lot of educational tips, looking at stocks that are forming bases or breaking out with earnings around the corner, that being a potential catalyst there. But there's always something to talk about, and it's always interesting and a lot of fun. So we hope everyone joins us, investors.com/IBD Live. And that's it for today, Ed. And we know you're a big part of IBD Live, so everyone can check us out as part of the team there as well. And we'll see you right back here, everyone, tomorrow.